My sister called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice light, almost cheerful, and said, "I'm moving my family into your lake house. We'll be there this weekend. Family has to help family, right?" I didn't answer at first. I remember staring at my office window in Boulder, watching people walk by, while my heart dropped somewhere I couldn't reach. She didn't ask. She didn't pause. She just announced it, like she was reminding me of an appointment I'd already agreed to. In that moment, I knew my life was about to crack open in ways I wasn't ready for. Before I tell you how that phone call changed everything, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from right now? What city? What state? What country? Because what happened to me might sound unbelievable, but it happens quietly, inside families, everywhere. I'm Evelyn Hart. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a senior risk analyst at a fintech company in Boulder, Colorado. On paper, my life looks stable. Good job. Decent income. Calm personality. I'm the one people describe as reliable, mature, easy to deal with. The good daughter. I've been that girl my entire life. Growing up, I was the oldest. That meant I learned early how to stay quiet, how to solve problems without complaining, how to make myself smaller so others could feel comfortable. My parents, Richard and Donna, didn't mean to hurt me, but they leaned on me. They expected me to understand, to give in, to smooth things over when my younger sister, Mara, made a mess of her own life. Mara is 3 years younger than me. She's impulsive, emotional, always chasing the next big idea. When things fall apart, she lands softly because someone else always catches her. Usually my parents. And when that wasn't enough, somehow it became me. 6 years ago, I made a decision that changed my world. I started saving for a house. Not a big one, not a fancy one, just something that belonged to me. I worked overtime, I skipped vacations, I said no to nights out, and yes to spreadsheets and second jobs. Every dollar had a purpose. That purpose became a small A-frame cabin by Alder Creek, in a mountain town called Pine Hollow. It's a little over an hour from Boulder, surrounded by pine trees and quiet roads. The first time I stood by the lake, I felt something I'd never felt before. Peace. Real peace. Not borrowed, not temporary. Inside the house, everything was simple. Neutral walls, clean lines, no clutter. The most important space was the loft upstairs, my art studio. Painting was the only thing that slowed my thoughts down, the only place where I didn't feel like I owed the world something. That room wasn't decoration, it was survival. That house wasn't just a property, it was my boundary. The one place where I wasn't a daughter or a sister or a fixer, just me. So when Mara called and told me she was moving her entire family into that house, it didn't just feel rude, it felt violent. I asked her what she meant. She laughed and said I barely used the place anyway, that it made more sense for her and her kids, that our parents agreed. She said it like the decision had already been made, like I was just catching up. I remember saying, "Mara, you can't do that. It's my house." She replied, "Evelyn, don't be selfish. You always do this. You think about yourself first." That word hit harder than anything else. Selfish. After everything I'd given up, after years of being the one who understood, who waited, who adjusted. By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking. I wasn't angry yet. I was something worse. I was afraid, because deep down, I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a test, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if being the good daughter would be enough to save me. And that phone call was only the beginning. I drove to Pine Hollow the next morning before the sun fully rose, my coffee untouched in the cup holder, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The road that usually calmed me felt unfamiliar, almost hostile. Every mile closer to the lake made my chest heavier, like I already knew what I was about to lose. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, my stomach dropped. There were 2 cars parked where there should have been none. Kyle's pickup truck, a minivan I didn't recognize, toys scattered near the porch, shoes by the door that weren't mine. The house didn't look like a place someone was visiting. It looked occupied, claimed. I unlocked the door with my key, and the first thing that hit me wasn't anger. It was shock. The walls. The warm, neutral tones I had chosen were gone, replaced with glossy silver wallpaper that caught the light in a harsh, artificial way. It felt cold, loud, wrong. The sofa I had saved months to buy was covered in thick floral fabric, the kind you'd expect in a clearance showroom, not in my living room. The air smelled like cheap cleaner and unfamiliar perfume. Mara appeared from the kitchen, smiling like she was hosting a housewarming party. "Oh, good, you're here," she said casually. "I was worried you'd overreact." Overreact. I looked around, struggling to process what I was seeing. Kyle stood behind her, avoiding my eyes. The kids were already running through the space, dragging toys across the floor I had polished by hand. "What did you do to my house?" I asked, my voice coming out quieter than I expected. Mara waved her hand dismissively. "Relax, it needed updates. It was so empty and depressing before. This makes it feel like a real family home." That's when she pulled out her phone, scrolled, and turned the screen toward me. A list of charges: furniture, wallpaper, paint, labor, total $4,200. "I'll Venmo you later," she said. "Or you can just write me a check." I stared at the number, my vision blurring. "You changed my house without asking me, and now you want me to pay for it?" She shrugged. "You barely use this place, and honestly, you make good money. You can afford it." I stepped past her and ran up the stairs. My studio was gone, the soft light, the canvases, the quiet, all replaced by bright blue walls, plastic shelves, and a bunk bed shoved against the window. My paints were missing. My sketches were stacked carelessly in a corner, bent, some stained. Something inside me cracked. I came back downstairs shaking. "That room was not yours to touch." Mara crossed her arms. "Evelyn, stop being dramatic. Kids need space. You're single. You don't need all this." That's when my parents arrived. They didn't ask how I felt. They didn't look around. They didn't even hesitate. "Evelyn," my mother said gently, like she was calming a child. "Why are you making this so difficult?" My father sighed. "Your sister needs help. You've always been independent. You can handle a little inconvenience." Inconvenience. I told them this was my home, that I hadn't agreed to any of this, that they couldn't just decide things for me. My mother frowned. "You're being selfish." That word again, like a verdict. I stopped arguing after that, not because I agreed, but because something inside me went cold. I realized this wasn't about misunderstanding. This was about entitlement, about years of them assuming I would bend. That night, I stayed at a motel. I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I opened the security app on my phone. The cameras I had installed years ago, mostly for peace of mind. I watched the footage quietly, Mara laughing on the phone. My father sitting at my kitchen table saying, "If you stay long enough, she can't just kick you out." Mara replying, "Exactly. She'll calm down. She always does." I set the phone down slowly. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't family helping family. This was a plan. And for the first time in my life, I understood something with painful clarity. The people who raised me, the sister I protected, weren't just crossing my boundaries. They were testing how much of myself they could take before I disappeared completely. By the time I left Pine Hollow, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't shaking. The fear had hardened into focus. This was the part of my brain I trusted. The one that had kept me alive in boardrooms full of men who underestimated me. The one trained to dissect risk, trace patterns, and follow evidence until the truth had nowhere left to hide. I stopped arguing with my family. I stopped explaining myself. I started documenting. Every message Mara sent me, every voicemail from my parents, screenshots of the invoice she'd proudly handed me, photos of the altered walls, the replaced furniture, the destroyed studio. I pulled timestamps from my security system and downloaded hours of footage, labeling each file carefully, the way I would for a high-stakes audit. This wasn't emotional anymore. This was procedural. I hired a lawyer in Denver who specialized in financial fraud and property disputes. Her office was quiet, minimalist, nothing like a courtroom drama. When I laid everything out on the table, she didn't interrupt. She didn't soften her language. "This is not a family disagreement," she said finally. "This is unlawful entry, property damage, attempted coercion, and potential fraud." Hearing it framed that way sent a chill through me. Not because I was scared, because it confirmed what I'd already felt in my gut. She explained how intent mattered, how patterns mattered, how the footage of my father advising Mara to stay long enough to establish residency changed everything, how invoices demanded under pressure could be interpreted as extortion. Then she paused, scrolling through a document on her screen. "There's something else," she said. This came up in a routine records check. She turned the monitor toward me. A rejected filing with the county clerk. A family trust document. My father's name on it. The lake house listed as an asset. My signature was missing. He tried to place your property into a shared trust without your consent, she said. It was denied due to incomplete authorization. I felt something drop inside my chest. Not shock, not even anger. Betrayal so clean and sharp, it almost felt surgical. I had trusted him, even when he sided against me, even when he minimized what was happening. And all the while, he had been trying to move my house out from under me quietly, legally, without ever telling me. As I drove back to Boulder, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't family. It was my bank. The woman on the line sounded polite, almost cheerful, until she asked me to confirm details of a mortgage application I knew nothing about. A loan request tied to my name, my credit, my property. Submitted over the phone. I told her I hadn't applied for anything. There was a pause. Then she said, "We have a recorded call." She played it. I recognized the cadence immediately. The confidence, the slight impatience when questioned. It was Mara. She used my full name, my date of birth. Information only family would know. She laughed lightly when asked security questions, like the process itself was inconvenient. I pulled the car over and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, listening to my sister impersonate me as if my identity were something she could borrow and return when she was done. When the recording ended, the banker cleared her throat. "We've flagged this as suspected fraud." That word landed heavy. Fraud. In that moment, the last illusion shattered. This wasn't entitlement anymore. This wasn't desperation. This was escalation. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. The trust filing, the audio recording, the security footage. She called me back within the hour. "This has crossed into criminal territory," she said, "and you need to stop engaging with them directly." That night, alone in my apartment, I replayed the moments I'd brushed off for years. The way my parents always asked me to wait, to compromise, to be patient. The way Mara assumed my life was available to her. The way silence had always been mistaken for consent. I understood something then that hurt more than anything else. They hadn't taken my house because they needed it. They took it because they believed they could. And now, the truth was documented, time-stamped, and impossible to ignore. I gave them one final chance. Not because they deserved it, but because I needed to know, without any doubt, who they would choose to be when the consequences were clear. Through my lawyer, I sent a formal notice. 10 days. That was it. 10 days to leave the house voluntarily, return the keys, and stop using my name, my credit, and my property. If they complied, I would not pursue criminal charges. It was the last off-ramp before everything turned irreversible. Mara laughed when she heard. She called me that night, her voice sharp and confident. "You can't kick us out," she said. "We live there now. We have rights." I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. I just listened. 2 days later, my parents called and said we needed a family meeting. Not at a cafe, not somewhere neutral. They insisted it be at the lake house, my lake house, the place they had already decided no longer belonged to me. They wanted home field advantage. I agreed, but before I drove to Pine Hollow, I made another call. A quiet one, to the local police department. I explained the situation calmly, factually. Ownership, unauthorized occupancy, evidence. They told me what they could and couldn't do. They told me to call when I arrived. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly like it had the first day I found it invaded. Cars parked like permanent fixtures. Curtains drawn, lights on, even though it was midday. It felt like stepping into someone else's life that had been built on top of mine. Everyone was already inside. Mara sat at the dining table, arms crossed, Kyle beside her. My parents were on the couch, tense but determined. No one offered me a seat. My mother started first. "Evelyn, this has gone too far," I nodded. "I agree." My father leaned forward. "You're tearing this family apart over a house." I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. "This isn't about a house," I said. It's about what you did to take it." Mara scoffed. "Oh, please, you're being dramatic again." I didn't look at her. I turned the screen toward all of them and pressed play. Security footage filled the room. My father's voice, clear and unmistakable, advising Mara to stay long enough. Mara laughing, saying I'd calm down. Timestamps, dates, context. My mother's face drained of color. I switched files. The recorded call from the bank. Mara using my name, my information. Her tone casual, almost bored. "That's not what it sounds like," Mara snapped. I opened the rejected trust filing, my father's signature. The house listed as a shared asset. My missing consent highlighted in red. The room went silent. "This is illegal," I said evenly. "All of it." My father stood up abruptly. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I replied. My voice didn't shake. "I understand that you tried to move my property without telling me. I understand that my sister tried to take out a loan in my name. And I understand that none of you thought I'd actually stop you." Mara slammed her hand on the table. "You're not calling the police on your own family." I looked at her then. Really looked at her. "I already did." The knock came less than a minute later. 2 officers stepped inside, calm, professional, neutral. I handed them my documents. My deed, my ID, the footage, the filings. They listened. They verified. They asked questions I answered without emotion. Mara's confidence evaporated in real time. One officer turned to her. "Ma'am, this property does not belong to you. You and your family will need to vacate immediately." My mother started crying. My father tried to argue. Kyle went pale. Mara stood frozen. "You can't do this," she whispered. "She's my sister." The officer replied gently. "That doesn't change ownership." They were given time to gather essentials, not furniture, not decorations, essentials. The house emptied slowly, every step heavy with disbelief. As they left, one officer asked Mara to stay back for questioning. I stood alone in the doorway, watching the space breathe again for the first time in weeks. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel cruel. I felt clear. For the first time in my life, the manipulation had failed. The legal process moved slower than the night my house was taken, but faster than the years I had spent being silent. I didn't attend every hearing. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke clearly, calmly, without emotion. The recordings, the filings, the bank call, the paper trail my sister never believed I would follow all the way to the end. Mara was convicted of fraud, extortion, and unlawful entry. The words sounded unreal when I first heard them, like they belonged to someone else's life. She received probation, mandatory community service, and was ordered to repay every dollar tied to the damage she caused. The record would follow her permanently, not as revenge, as consequence. The civil case came after. That was quieter, colder, numbers instead of voices. In the end, I was compensated for repairs, legal fees, and emotional damages. My parents were held financially responsible for their role, not because they hated me, but because intentions don't erase impact. I didn't feel relief when it was over. I felt empty. And then, slowly, I felt free. The first thing I did was take the house back piece by piece. I stripped the walls down to their bones and chose colors that felt like breathing again. I replaced every lock, upgraded every camera, not out of fear, but out of respect for myself. Safety is not paranoia when it's earned. I rebuilt my studio last. I stood in the empty loft for a long time before bringing anything in. No rush, no pressure. When I finally set up my easel again, the light fell across the floor exactly the way it used to. I cried then, not for what I lost, but for what I protected. I started therapy, real therapy. Not the kind where you vent and move on, but the kind where you learn how deeply being the good one can carve you hollow. I learned that boundaries aren't punishments, they're definitions. And without them, love turns into entitlement. Work changed too. My company offered me a promotion I would have been too afraid to accept before. I negotiated remote flexibility and began splitting my time between Boulder and Pine Hollow. For the first time, my life fit the shape I wanted, not the one I was assigned. My parents tried to return. They showed up one afternoon, unannounced, standing by the driveway like they still belonged there. My hands didn't shake when I saw them on the camera feed. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I called the police. They left quietly. That was the moment I knew the cycle was broken. Now, when I sit alone in my studio and look out over the lake, the silence feels different. It's not heavy, it's earned. The water moves slowly. The trees don't rush. And for the first time in my life, neither do I. I used to believe freedom came from sacrifice, from being patient, from absorbing discomfort so others wouldn't have to. I was wrong. Freedom came the moment I stopped asking for permission to protect what was mine. Not just the house, my name, my work, my peace. If you've listened to this story from beginning to end, thank you for staying with me. And wherever you are in the world tonight, I wish you a peaceful, warm, and joyful Christmas. May it be filled with quiet moments that belong only to you. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories from women who learned, sometimes painfully, how to choose themselves. You're not alone, and neither was I.